All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring a seriously mind-bending alternate timeline from the mid-1990s. We're looking at one of the biggest, most inescapable television shows in history. But we're going to flip the script. We're examining it through a completely different lens. The very real possibility that it almost didn't make it.
I really want you to imagine this for a second. Picture it. You're sitting on your couch in the mid-90s, tuning in to watch six strangers hang out in a coffee shop. You know, the jokes are decent, the ratings are, okay. And then, just months later, the network quietly pulls the plug. What actually happens if this show gets canceled right after season 1?
Well, if that happens, literally everything changes. There's no season 2, no Ross and Rachel, no we were on a break, and absolutely no global cultural phenomenon. And the crazy part about the source material we're digging into today, this alternate timeline was way more likely than most people realize.
So, let's get into Section 1, the alternate 1994 timeline. Look, it's so easy to look back with rose-tinted glasses, but the context of that era is absolutely everything. As this quote perfectly captures, success can rewrite memory. Today, we naturally remember the show as this unstoppable juggernaut. But back when it premiered, it was far from a sure thing. We've kind of retroactively assigned it this aura of inevitability that honestly just wasn't there at the very beginning.
The initial pitch was incredibly risky compared to the standard, play-it-safe sitcoms dominating NBC at the time. Just look at the 1994 norms here on the left. Networks wanted a single lead character, a traditional family structure, or a standard workplace setting. Now contrast that with the pitch on the right. No single lead, no family, no central workplace. Just 6 young adults trying to figure out life, work, and relationships. I know that sounds totally normal to us today, but television looked very, very different back then. And on top of that unusual pitch, the show faced immense industry pressure right out of the gate. NBC had sky-high expectations because it was airing alongside some incredibly powerful sitcom competition. Plus, the cast wasn't exactly full of major established stars yet. And let me tell you, the networks in the 90s were absolutely ruthless. Dozens of new shows launched every year and disappeared just as fast. Season 1 performed well enough to survive, sure, but if there had been a small scheduling shift, slightly less audience momentum, or just a tiny dip in ratings causing NBC to say no, the series would have vanished instantly. All right, moving on to Section 2, erasing the iconic moments.
So, what exactly gets wiped off the map if the show doesn't survive past its freshman year? Because Season 1 really only functioned to introduce the characters, and early cancellation effectively erases almost every single defining memory we associate with the series. Tracing this timeline, you can clearly see that Season 2 and beyond are what actually created the legend. Ross and Rachel's relationship, that didn't become a massive cultural event until years later. Monica and Chandler didn't even hook up until much later. Phoebe's biggest emotional arcs, Joey's most iconic comedic moments, all of that was still waiting ahead of them.
And for characters like Chandler, his personal growth was barely even beginning in that first year. By cutting the cord early, we lose incredible long-term character development. We're left with their stories completely unfinished in our collective memory. Essentially, everything that actually makes the show memorable simply doesn't happen.
Let's jump into Section 3, the industry ripple effect.
You see, this alternate history wouldn't just be a bummer for the fans. It completely rewrites the careers of the cast and the fundamental economics of TV. Let's follow this trajectory. Without the show continuing, those 6 actors just scatter. Some would probably keep acting, some might eventually find other shows, but they completely miss out on becoming one of television's most famous and globally recognized ensembles. They don't become the massive household names we know today. Furthermore, the entire economics of television change. This series helped prove a formula that networks would end up chasing for decades. The idea that audiences don't just return for the stories. They return for emotional familiarity. They return for the feeling of just hanging out with the characters, for comfort viewing. Because this specific show proved networks could literally make millions with this hangout formula. It influenced countless ensemble comedies that followed. Without it reaching its peak, the whole sitcom landscape of the late 90s and 2000s would look and feel completely different.
Next up, Section 4, the cultural void.
Zooming out to the macro level for a second, we have to look at the massive cultural void this cancellation would leave in our society. Because pop culture rarely replaces things exactly one-to-one. The series didn't just succeed, it arrived at a very specific, pivotal cultural moment. Young adulthood was shifting. Living in big cities suddenly felt highly aspirational. And most importantly, it globally spread this powerful, resonating idea that your friends could become your chosen family. That emotional connection hooked millions around the world. If it just vanishes after one season, generations of people lose the exact show they would later rely on. Millions lose their ultimate comfort blanket. You know, the series they'd endlessly rewatch during breakups, throughout their college years, during career changes, holidays, or just quiet evenings at home.
Which brings us to Section 5, the fragility of pop culture. This really brings us to a profound realization about just how fragile entertainment history really is. You never truly know what's going to become permanent. It's wild to think about, right? Some of the most important stories in modern culture only survived because of decisions that seemed incredibly minor at the time. A literal giant of pop culture rests on the razor's edge of a single-season renewal. One executive vote, just one extra chance to prove itself. Some of the most important stories in culture weren't obvious hits at the beginning. They just managed to get one more season.
If that one chance isn't given, television certainly keeps moving forward, but it does so without one of its most recognizable and beloved comfort worlds. Think about it. No endless reruns playing in the background of your life. No iconic finales bringing the whole world to a standstill. No new people discovering the series decades later and feeling like they're joining an old group of friends.
But you know, TV doesn't leave empty space for long. Audiences would have definitely attached themselves to something else. So, I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. If this massive cultural giant was never given a second season and just quietly vanished in 1995, what other show do you think would have stepped up to fill the void?